My name is Rick Walsworth. I'm the Senior Product Line Marketing Manager for VMware Cloud Foundation within VMware's HCI business unit. Today, we're going to focus on infrastructure modernization and really take a close look at how to leverage VMware's strategic positioning for not only infrastructure, but also for applications to be able to modernize data centers as we go forward. So let's just first take a look at some of the learnings that we had based on our customer analysis working with Kubernetes and these modern application in customer environments. First off, from a standpoint of developer productivity, they saw over 37% increase in developer productivity using Kubernetes as a development platform. On top of that, if you look at the process efficiency, over 82% improvements in process efficiency, meaning that it took less time in order to get code into production. So when you're taking that type of productivity and that type of efficiency, it's really helping to elevate DevOps and these modern applications in your enterprise today. On top of that, the ability to be able to leverage your resources in such a way that you're much less reliant on public cloud resources, it immediately provides cost savings to be able to deploy these networks out in mass at scale with enterprise reliability. And these are production-ready systems. So let's take a closer look now at what VMware's been doing in this space to be able to help accelerate not only the infrastructure side of the equation, but also from the application side of the equation. First off, VMware is all in Kubernetes. This really started a couple of years ago with the acquisition of Heptio. And that Heptio acquisition not only brought in a lot of very relevant technology that I'm going to talk about here today, but it also brought a lot of expertise and a lot of domain experience, not only from a technology standpoint, but also from an industry standpoint. VMware right now is the number 3 contributor to open source projects within the Kubernetes organization. Now, if you take on top of that and now take the Bitnami acquisition, which had a marketplace that provided applications and services on an online forum that's now been integrated into VMware, you now have a marketplace that matches the applications and the infrastructure that's being provided. So you really have a full stack solution, which is absolutely complemented by last year's acquisition of Pivotal. Because what Pivotal brings is they bring this expertise around the ability to be able to build applications at scale and then deliver a platform as a service offering that's now been integrated into the overall VMware stack. But where do you get started? And so what I'm going to talk about today is I'm really going to talk about some of the key initiatives that are useful for being able to drive these initiatives into mainstream enterprise adoption. So in order to drive enterprise adoption of Kubernetes within these large environments, there's really 3 key fundamental principles you want to walk away with. First off, start with your existing infrastructure. Because if you start internal and you look at your existing infrastructure and ability to be able to modernize that, it's going to go a long way to be able to drive efficiency and productivity within your environment. So you really want to start with that existing infrastructure. But the second key tenet is the ability to be able to maintain that cloud optionality over time. In other words, if I start on-prem, I also want the ability to be able to extend into the cloud. But what's important there is you want to make sure that I have consistent operational models on-prem and in the cloud. So that way, regardless of where the data is, that operational model is consistent. The only way I can deliver that consistent operational model is to have consistent infrastructure. And that's really where Cloud Foundation comes in. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But as you're doing this and as you're building this out, realize you're not on your own. There are a lot of resources available, both online as well as through our professional services organization, that allow you the ability to be able to access expertise anytime you need it. So these are the 3 things you want to start with in order to drive adoption of Kubernetes within your own organization. But in order to do so, you really want to take a look at how are you going to approach this, because there's really a dual focus. You could look at things from the applications down, right? Because that's where the developers typically live. They start at the application layer and try to look at everything from the applications down in the infrastructure. From their standpoint, the infrastructure, they don't care whether it's on-prem or what's in the cloud. You take the opposite side of that and now look at it from the view of the admins, the VI admins that are building out infrastructure. They look at the world from infrastructure up. They want the ability to be able to deploy on a consistent basis infrastructure, regardless of whether it's based on VMs or based on containers. So the ability to be able to provide this consistent infrastructure layer, regardless of the underlying cloud that you're using, provides the ability to be able to deploy these modern applications at scale. Now, as we build this out, there are also different requirements that these users have as they're building out these applications. First off, from the standpoint of the developers, again, they're looking at the world from an application down. Developers need velocity. As I said in the beginning, they're trying to find ways to get better efficiency, better productivity out of everything they do. The only way to do that is to be able to remove friction. So things like trouble tickets and, IT tend to get in the way because most of these developers are cloud native. In other words, they're used to essentially opening up a cloud resource and getting their job done. So their expectations for that level of service within their own organization is exactly the same. They want that velocity. Now, on the flip side, you look at it from the VI admin side, they want stability. They want to be able to make sure that their systems are stable and secure and meet all of the corporate governance requirements that are there to be able to make sure that everything they do falls into that corporate governance. Now, if indeed you're breaking some of the models from a security standpoint, then they have to go off and create their own security mechanisms, which in many cases leads to inconsistency from an operations standpoint, which is never good. You always want to make sure that you're maintaining that infrastructure and operational consistency to be able to deliver both velocity and stability. And so really the goal here is to be able to connect the developers and the operators in a shared effort. You want this to be collaborative. You want to be able to have applications and infrastructure that play very nicely together. So again, looking at it from the view of the persona that is the developer, they're essentially trying to provide the ability to be able to modernize their applications in the environment. That is their goal. And they want to be able to do so across private cloud, public cloud, and even working at the edge. So they essentially need a model that operates in this multi-cloud environment that gives them a consistent experience regardless of where the data lives. Then from the VI admin standpoint, they're looking at everything from the infrastructure up. And they're trying to modernize their infrastructure to be able to provide that consistent experience using infrastructure and operations that are exactly the same, regardless of where the data lies. And so this combination is very, very unique, and it fits very nicely into what VMware rolled out as part of our Tanzu strategy. So if you look at the Tanzu portfolio, it really fits into three core areas: build, manage, and run. On the build side, this is where a lot of the technology from Heptio and from Bitnami and as well from Pivotal come in, because it provides a complete framework that helps the developers build their applications regardless of where the data lives. On the managed side, we have a lot of assets that were homegrown, but also as part of some of the acquisitions I mentioned in the introduction. But this is really the ability to be able to provide a common framework to be able to manage these Kubernetes systems, regardless of whether I'm on-prem or in the cloud. Their projects are working, but as well for IT, so that IT has full visibility into what's happening across teams, across clusters, and also across cloud. But today, where we're going to focus most of our discussion is in the run space, because this is where the rubber meets the road in terms of the ability to deliver this ubiquitous Kubernetes runtime that can run in the cloud, can run as a separate application on-prem, but can also run embedded within vSphere. And that's really some of the magic that came out of the Project Pacific announcement last year at VMworld, and that was announced at the Modern Applications announcement in March of 2020. And so we're going to spend a little bit more time to talk about that, and then I'll essentially tell you how to put this together and where to go get more information. Okay, now let's take a look at some of the infrastructure challenges, and then what are the desired outcomes, again, from the perspective of that VI admin. The first challenge is, how do I reliably operate and patch all of my legacy applications and my container applications together with one set of tools? And that's really the ability to be able to deliver an outcome that's based on better stability, because I want to be able to make sure that everything that's running in my infrastructure, from the infrastructure itself all the way to the application stack and everything in between, is all fully up to date, that I have the latest patches, all the software updates are completely up to date. On top of that, I want the ability to be able to make sure that the developers can gain access to resources without having to open tickets, because tickets introduce friction. Friction introduces delays within getting this code checked in. So they want the ability to be able to self-serve using APIs as a way to be able to deliver these services. And so the way to do that is to be able to make sure that your developers have access to the APIs and the underlying resources or services that are delivered by the infrastructure. And you want to be able to make sure that you can do that in a way that accelerates developer velocity and doesn't get in the way of delivering these applications at scale. The other thing a lot of people worry about is Kubernetes sprawl, right? Where I start building Kubernetes environments and then all of a sudden, before I know it, it's grown out of control, just because of the fact that I may have different versions of Kubernetes running in different environments. So the ability to be able to manage all your Kubernetes clusters from a single control point gives you the ability to be able to make sure that you're entitling security and compliance across every step of the way. And remember that as I start in the data center, I want the ability to be able to extend to any cloud. So we're not tying you to any one type of service. You can start on-prem, but if I want to extend that service now into AWS, I can use that using VMware Cloud on AWS. But if I want to go to Azure or GCP or IBM or Oracle, I have those as options as well. And regardless of where I'm operating these, I can actually have a consistent infrastructure model that gives me the ability to deliver consistent operations. And you remember, if you're starting in your data center, vSphere runs 80% of enterprise workloads out there. So you're already starting from a position of strength, but we also offer a complete integrated stack where I've got management, compute, network, and storage that is fully consistent on-prem, but then also offers the ability to extend that into any cloud, leveraging our hybrid cloud services using Cloud Foundation. And that's a great setup to be able to talk a little bit more about Cloud Foundation, because Cloud Foundation is a full stack, hyper-converged infrastructure solution that unifies traditional VM workloads in addition to Kubernetes-based workloads. So it gives me a solution that's really unifying both the containers and Kubernetes and virtual machines into this common platform, provides a complete operating stack that builds automatically all the compute, storage, and networking resources with the management and automation, and then wrapped with security that provides the ability to be able to define security policies once and then deploy it on a regular basis. So it gives me the ability to deploy this without having to go reset the security every time. So I know that every time a developer goes to access a new set of tools or to go to another namespace in order to build an application, they're doing so with all the security mechanisms built in as part of the services that are being deployed. So as you can see here, what Cloud Foundation does is it takes this consistent infrastructure stack, now builds a cloud operating model. That cloud operating model allows you to be able to have developers and app maintenance teams, as well as the infrastructure teams. They now have one place to be able to go to be able to deploy these applications on a consistent basis out across your private cloud, your public cloud, as well as edge deployments. Now, what we've done is we've actually taken Tanzu and integrated it into vSphere. By integrating Tanzu into vSphere, we now have a whole new set of services that tie directly to the underlying infrastructure that's been virtualized by vSphere, vSAN, NSX, and vRealize. And we now deliver those as a set of services, including VM service, storage service, network service, hybrid mobility, as well as vSphere pods and registries. Now, what these hybrid infrastructure services do is essentially provide an additional layer of abstraction that give us now services that can be exposed via a set of APIs. Now, by exposing these APIs, developers have direct access to not only the hybrid infrastructure services, but also the Tanzu runtime. This Tanzu runtime is actually a fully compliant with the upstream Kubernetes stack and gives the developers the ability to be able to build these Kubernetes clusters and then define them into namespaces. These namespaces can be mapped into different workload types or different application types. In this example, I'm showing database and analytics as one, AI and machine learning as another. I could have business critical and time critical applications. Now, each one of these namespaces has a unique set of properties. The properties may consist of the security mechanism that I'm building in, may also consist of what types of services get associated with this, and then what resources get mapped into it. Because remember, these Kubernetes clusters are not just a set of containers that are brought together or a single VM that's stitched together. These now may be, dozens of containers and may be mapped to, several VMs to be able to tie together all the systems as a way to be able to deploy these services. But the namespace provides a very nice management construct as a way to be able to manage this, reducing the load on the IT operator. So what vSphere with Kubernetes, delivered through Cloud Foundation, has done is we've integrated this Tanzu capability into the Cloud Foundation stack and now deliver it as a set of services directly to the application owners. From the developer side, the developers now access via the APIs. So they can use their kubectl commands as they do in any Kubernetes environment and use these kubectl commands as a way to be able to deploy these services at scale in a self-service manner so that they never have to go back and bug the IT operator in order to get more services. Or if they're having difficulties, they can go troubleshoot it themselves. So it really provides a nice framework that allows the IT admins and the developers to be able to work collaboratively as they're building out these applications and be able to do so at scale without any type of challenges. Okay, now let's take a closer look at how to take these applications, which are actually quite complex, and be able to break it down into its fundamental concepts and then show how that maps into the namespace within a Cloud Foundation environment. So first off, just take a look at the cluster itself. I have my control plane, which are running the nodes underneath of it, which is then serving my Kubernetes native applications out across there. That may attach to a VM, and the VM is accessing and providing data as part of that, as well as has an underlying database that's actually servicing this directly, being able to provide the backend data, as well as I have native pods that are providing, just pure performance from a container orchestration standpoint, delivering, native container pods natively within vSphere that run as first-class citizens within vSphere. Now, as I build this out, what you'll also see is that each of these elements has its own namespace. And within that namespace, I now have the ability to be able to define, using the kubectl commands, the way to be able to provide self-service access to infrastructure. You've heard the term infrastructure as code. This is essentially what's happening here, because I have the ability to be able to use these kubectl commands and essentially be able to define the makeup of the storage capacity, the networking requirements, the security requirements. These are all predefined within the template of the namespace, and then allows the administrator to go in and customize these to their specific needs. So this is the ability for the developers to be able to administrate all of these on their own, to be able to define within the constraints of the namespace what are the aspects and the characteristics of each of these Kubernetes clusters as they get deployed at scale. And again, remember, they never have to go to the IT admin as a way to be able to do this. They actually are doing all this operations completely via APIs using these kubectl commands. Now, what happens from the IT admin standpoint, as the developers are building out these applications, this also simplifies scale out for these IT admins, because the IT admins now have the ability within vCenter to be able to monitor all of these changes that are happening, ensure that indeed we're maintaining compliance, but as long as the developers are staying within the namespace and within the properties of the namespace, they have the ability to do so. But what the admins can focus now are being much more strategic within their environments. The ability to be able to apply policies and quotas to the developers as a way to be able to provide role-based access, providing the developers the ability to be able to leverage that self-service capability and be as independent as possible, but to be able to maintain velocity as they're developing these new applications. All of the vSphere features, so HA, vMotion, DRS, these are all now applied at the application level and to the containers themselves. So I can actually take advantage of some of the more powerful capabilities of vSphere as I deploy these services. And now I can manage these clusters, containers, and existing VMs all within one console, which is vCenter. So I get the power of vCenter now deployed at scale, delivering Kubernetes production-ready containers. So to summarize here, what VMware Cloud Foundation 4.0 does is it provides the ability to be able to streamline workflows, both from the admin standpoint and from the developer standpoint, to really bridge the gap that exists today between developers and admins. Cloud Foundation is really a proven prescriptive approach for implementing hybrid cloud, extending private cloud services into the public cloud, but as a way to be able to consolidate and standardize infrastructure to lower cost and simplify operations. This allows both the developers and the admins to be much more strategic within their own organizations. Also, the ability to be able to use advanced automation as a way to not only do the deployment and configuration, but also managing the complete life cycles of the SDDC stack as a way to be able to help the admins be much more productive, as well as the developers to be productive at the same time. So this is a tool that allows you to be able to build these systems out, but deploy Kubernetes at enterprise scale. This is really a game changer. We're really excited about this capability. So obviously, we want you to be able to take what we've started with here and take that next step. So there are other technical sessions that follow this one for Cloud Foundation that provide more detail, and as well as some demonstrations that you can use as part of your education on Cloud Foundation. But I always encourage people to go directly to the Cloud Foundation site on the web. We also have a Cloud Foundation Resource Center. So that's where you can get demos and deep dives, and you really start to dig into the technical details of the solution itself. And there was actually an excellent analyst report that was written just recently by ESG called VMware Cloud Foundation Integrates vSphere with Kubernetes. This is a great way to get an analyst view for what's happening within these environments. And then, of course, always follow Cloud Foundation on both our Twitter and LinkedIn platforms as a way to stay current with what's happening in the organization. So I really appreciate you taking the time to visit with us today and to view these slides. hopefully, as you've been asking questions along the way, but if there are any other questions that are follow on, we'd be more than happy to speak with you as part of that. Thank you very much for coming, and have a great day.